And I'm going to go ahead and start the webinar. So we'll be live and attendees will be joining us and hearing everything going forward. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Drought Funding Workshop for Counties. My name is Jessica Bean. I am with the State Water Resources Control Board. We're going to give folks just a couple more minutes to log on to Zoom, and then we'll go ahead and begin our workshop today. I do see a hand up here. Looks like Javia Green. Did you have a question?
Yes, I do. Hi, thank you for hosting this today. I just have a quick question about the target audience for this.
Yes.
Zone 7 is an dependent special district of Alameda County, but we have our own board. And we are also a state water project contractor. So I'm just trying to understand who's the target audience here when you talk about counties.
Sure. Matt, do you want to briefly speak to that? I'm not sure how what was just described links in with our view of counties and representatives.
Yeah, sure. So primarily the targets were kind of the local emergency operations folks at the county level, and then also anybody involved in like LPAs or regulating drinking water. The intent really is kind of focused on being able to provide interim drinking water to kind of state small water systems and domestic well users within a county's jurisdiction. So I'm not sure exactly what your branch would oversee for the county, but that was kind of the general target.
Okay. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for asking, and Matt, thanks for clarifying. All right, so it looks like it's 10:02. We'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. Again, my name is Jessica Bean. I am with the State Water Resources Control Board, and today you are joining us for our drought funding workshops for counties webinar. We're going to be hosting 2 of these. We have this one today, and then we have another one on August 31st. It will be the same information in both webinars, so you do not need to attend both of the webinars. Next slide. Okay, so we were just, if you were listening into that little intro, we were talking about a bit of the purpose of this workshop. So we do want to let you know that we recognize that many of our counties are struggling to help their residents right now deal with the impacts of the current drought emergency. And so we're hosting this workshop to discuss the roles of counties and the roles of state agencies in emergency drought response efforts. We're also going to review how counties can access funding and develop programs for county-wide programs related to emergency drinking water shortages. And then there's going to be time throughout the workshop for us to answer questions from county representatives and any potential partner nonprofit organizations. And so I just want to explain that while we have opened this up to the general public to listen into the workshop and other interested people, really our focus here is to speak with the counties and their representatives and potentially those nonprofit partners who might be helping to implement a program like this, to ensure that we can answer their questions. So that really is our priority. We only have 90 minutes today. So what we plan to do to accommodate other questions that may be from other representatives, other people, is to use our Q&A feature. So that's what the image is on this PowerPoint slide right here, is showing that Q&A feature. If you look down at the bottom of your Zoom window, you should have a little icon that says Q&A. If you click on that, you can insert questions there to ask us. That's a great way where you can ask questions during the presentations. If you have clarifying questions, we can either answer those through this box, or we can answer them verbally. It gives us an opportunity to do that. And then if we run out of time and we're unable to answer the question, it also gives us the opportunity to follow up with you so that we can answer it after the workshop. And again, this image is showing you what that Q&A box looks like, and you can insert those questions at any time. Okay, next slide. So just to give you a sense of what we're going to be going through for the rest of our time together, we have a workshop overview that I'm giving you right now. We're also going to do a brief overview on county and state agency roles in drought. Next, we're going to have representatives from the State Water Board and the Department of Water Resources talk to you about the different drought activities that we have going on currently, and then jump into the meat of this discussion, which is the drought funding for counties. And essentially, we're going to talk about what the scope of the program looks like, how funding works, and then next steps for counties who are interested in participating in this. Throughout that presentation, there will be times for representatives to ask questions, but we're going to also do kind of a final Q&A at the end for the counties to ensure that we've clarified anything. And at that point, if there's additional time, we will open up the questions to other members of our workshop today. And then we'll have a quick wrap up. So without further ado, I'm going to invite Victor Lopez to join us. Victor is going to speak to you about the county and state agency roles in drought. Victor?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Jessica. It's really great that we have 187 participants. That's a great turnout. And we really appreciate the time that the county representatives are taking to join us today. And as Jessica mentioned, my name is Victor Lopez. I'm a staff engineer with the State Water Board's Emergency Management Program. As we all are aware, the state is going through a number of emergencies. One of them is the severe drought that many counties throughout the state are facing as of today. And I just want to give a quick overview of what the roles and responsibilities that we anticipate the counties and also the state will be playing in helping small community systems and also individual homeowners deal with the drought that a lot of counties are facing, as I mentioned, throughout the state. First and foremost, we like the state small systems and individual homeowners that are facing water shortages to reach out to their local county Office of Emergency Services. We believe that that should be the first resource that they should be looking into. In addition to that, the county local Office of Emergency Service will be able to determine if they have the resources available to provide assistance to the small systems and individual homeowners. In addition to that, we understand that the local county OES offices are in direct communication with the California Office of Emergency Services and their regional coordinators. So we anticipate that there's going to be a lot of back and forth, and the Cal OES regional coordinators may be able to provide additional guidance and help. So moving over to what the role of the state is going to be in helping small systems and individual homeowners in this drought that the state is facing. So I want to emphasize one thing, though, that small systems and individual homeowners are not eligible to get direct funding from the state. However, as you're going to see in this presentation, the state, through funding from the State Water Board and the Department of Water Resources, is proposing to partner up with the counties that are facing drought issues. And in what that will entail is developing programs that are going to help small systems and also individual homeowners that are facing water shortages, or individual homeowners that their wells are running dry. The programs will be able to provide short-term and long-term solutions to the water systems and individual homeowners. And as you're going to see in this presentation, we're going to go over the kind of the meat and potatoes of what the programs are going to look like, the funding that is available from the Department of Water Resources and also the State Water Board. And with that, I'll turn it over to Matt Pawelczyk, who will go over more in detail the funding and additional resources that are available. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Victor, and thanks, Jessica, as well. I'll go ahead and introduce myself first, and then we'll kind of dive into the rest of the presentation here. So my name is Matt Pawelczyk. I work with the State Water Resource Control Board's Division of Financial Assistance, and I manage our emergency drinking water and cleanup and abatement account program. My group has kind of been taking up coordination with the Department of Water Resources and outreach for counties in developing these programs. So I wanted to begin by touching on our kind of interagency coordination and some of the drought funding activities that the State Water Board and the Department of Water Resources have been working on over the last few months. And then we'll kind of a pause for questions and then move into some of the more specifics regarding these regional programs that we're here to discuss in more detail today. So again, just to reiterate the intent of this webinar and discussion is that we really understand that many counties are struggling to help their residents deal with the impacts of the current drought and are interested in furthering conversations to develop these regional programs to assist counties in their drought response. Over the last few months, the State Water Board and the Department of Water Resources have started some conversations with counties regarding some funding resources, and have also been coordinating regularly in kind of reviewing and identifying which types of projects are appropriate to be funded by each agency for both drought emergency response, interim drinking water, and also for longer term resiliency projects. Next slide, please. So through our work, we've identified a need for these regional programs that address drought-related issues, specifically for state small water systems and domestic well users. The funding typically is targeted for disadvantaged communities and low-income households. The State Water Board and DWR, as I mentioned, are kind of interested in partnering with counties to develop these regional programs to help fill emergency drought funding gaps. And I'll touch on this quickly. We have a slide that covers it a little more, but the plan is for the State Water Board's Division of Financial Assistance to kind of take lead in outreach and funding efforts with the counties in the southern portion of the state, and DWR to be taking the lead in the northern portion of the state. Next slide, please. So just kind of an overview of some recent funding activities here, and funding that's been recently made available. So just kind of a high level overview. On July 20th of this year, the State Water Board adopted a resolution that authorized the use of $10 million in emergency drought funding, which is in addition to other general funding sources that we have available. The Department of Water Resources recently released their guidelines for a $200 million small community drought relief program, focusing on emergency and interim needs of small water systems and rural communities. And DWR is expected to release this fall an additional $100 million in grant funding for urban drought relief projects and another $100 million for multi-benefit drought relief projects. Next slide, please. So this map is just kind of to highlight a couple of things. One, the red dots, it shows the locations of the kind of recent emergency funding requests that we've received roughly through early August. And these are the projects that we've been closely coordinating with the Department of Water Resources on. And we do obviously anticipate more of these requests coming in from kind of areas outside of our existing programs. The other thing that is kind of outlined in this map in the shaded areas, primarily in the Central Coast and Central Valley, are the existing kind of regional funding programs that the Division of Financial Assistance has available for providing some of the services we're going to talk about a little later on. So really the kind of the intent here is to kind of show where we are well positioned within the state to respond to emergency funding needs and providing interim drinking water assistance, and then where obviously we kind of have a gap in those existing programs. Next slide, please. Now, I just wanted to quickly touch on some of the recent funding approvals that we have, both from the State Water Board and also the Department of Water Resources. Most of these were reflected on the prior map there. So we've recently funded four projects through the State Water Board. One's a desalination plant for the city of Fort Bragg, and then the others are primarily hauled water or emergency repairs. It totals a little over $600,000 in total funding provided over the last couple of months. I also wanted to note that this list does not include any assistance that was provided through the existing regional funding agreements that I kind of showed on the prior slide there. Next slide, please. So the next two slides just cover projects that DWR has committed funding to statewide. This was done a couple weeks ago. There was a press release that came out with the guidelines as well. It totals about $25 million in funding. I'm not going to go through the specifics of each one, but most of them are, installation of new infrastructure, new wells, pumps or lowering of intakes and whatnot as well. I also wanted to note that, some of these projects, as I mentioned, we've been coordinating closely with the Department of Water Resources and determining which agency will take the lead in funding for these. And several of these were transferred from from the State Water Board to the Department of Water Resources, and that's noted on the slides as well. Next slide, Molly. And this is just the remaining list of the total of 10 projects that were recently awarded. Next slide, please. Now we have a break for questions, kind of just on the current drought activities and anything that's been covered up to this point.
Thanks, Matt. And folks, if you have a question, if you want to raise your hand again, we would like to save this time primarily for our county representatives or NGOs who might be administering these kind of projects. So I'm going to start with Debbie. Oh, Debbie took her hand down. So how about Thomas?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, go right ahead.
Okay. Yeah, so my name's Tom Fayram, and I'm with the County of Santa Barbara Public Works Department. And in that capacity, we are the contracting entity for both Bureau Reclamation projects in our county and also for the State Water Project. This may be a question that's not as applicable for this section because you're talking about providing water to those that ran out. But the larger question that we're interested in is, does the state have any plans, or should you be thinking about more state level actions that can help restore water supplies in our county? Due to a number of factors, our USBR supplies are being reduced. We all know what's happening with the State Water Project. And while funding is one aspect that's important, another is leadership from the state on whether it's regulatory relief, funding for other projects such as desal for the long term. And I would just note that for coastal counties such as Santa Barbara County, a desal project that could replace our state water project would then leave that water for the benefit of the balance of the state. So there's a statewide nexus here for starting to address these issues as our water supplies have eroded without any replacements being done. So I would just, I'll stop there and hear what you have to say, and hopefully see some more work on that, as we move forward. Thank you very much for having this today.
Thanks, Tom, and Matt or anyone else. Do you have a response for Tom, or is that something that you feel we'll be getting into, or we need to table for now?
Yeah, I would say that the presentation doesn't necessarily get into any detail about those kind of longer term drought resiliency or future drought planning efforts. I know that DWR does have some funding available potentially for some of those resources and whatnot. The real focus of this is more so on the development of these regional programs for that emergency response. So definitely something that we could kind of flag and follow up on, I would think.
Great, thanks, Matt. All right, looks like Sue. Sue, you had a question?
And there we go. So I put mine in the question box too. In the previous drought, when we needed to do emergency responses for domestic wells in particular that went dry, the county wasn't, one of the counties that I worked with at least, and I think this was true with some of the others as well, weren't really ready and prepared and didn't have staffing, and sometimes weren't really committed to responding. And so this time around, I'm just wondering if the counties are ready. Do all counties have OESs? What's the county response to this structure? And are they ready in terms of timing and staff and so on to respond and get the funding out and work with individuals or NGOs like ourselves?
Yeah, Sue, that's a really good question. I think that, part of the reason we're having this workshop is that we recognize that some counties are in better positions than others to do these types of things. And so what we're talking about here and right now is to provide funding opportunities to ensure that there are programs set up in counties that need assistance. And so I don't know that we can speak specifically to how each county is prepared at this point. There is a list of the drought, the water assistance county emergency management information on the Cal OES website, and every county does in fact have a representative, but they are going to probably be at different points. Like most counties, they're not all in the same place. But today, the goal here is to get out information for counties and explain how counties can work with the state to get the funding to get those programs started.
So I guess I'll follow up then, based on experience, it doesn't happen overnight. And so how quickly will the counties be able to respond, because they're limited too, and many of them, of course, like you said, somebody said, are dealing with different fires and whatnot, as well as the drought. And they're limited. So how quickly maybe some of the counties can respond? How quickly would the counties realistically be able to do what the state is asking to respond to individuals whose well is dry right now, for example?
I don't know that we have that information right now. Matt, if you feel like you can answer the question about that. I know that some counties do have programs in place already. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, so we have our existing programs with self-help that cover, that swath of counties. There's an existing program with Tulare County for bottled water. And outside of that, there's not much that's existing. I don't know if there's anything else that Victor's aware of specifically from kind of the establishment of the EOCs and whatnot. Obviously, that's information that we could follow up with afterwards as well. But yeah, I understand the point and concern there as well.
Yeah, because it doesn't happen overnight. And I've got neighbors with dry wells. So how do we get the word out? How does it happen? They can't wait 4 months for a program to get established. Sorry to be so icky about it. It's just based on past experience that I'm concerned about asking the counties to set up something that they don't currently have.
And thank you, Sue. We appreciate that feedback, and that's definitely something that we'll make sure that we follow up with. And I just do want to remind people that we have very limited time today, and
Okay.
intention here is to make sure that counties can understand how we can get those started. So I am going to go ahead and pause here and ask that other folks that have their hands up again, if you have questions specifically about the counties and how to clarify those questions, that's what we're really looking for here. So Mark, did you have a question in that vein?
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, go right ahead.
Mark Smith on behalf of El Dorado Water Agency. Just a similar kind of follow-up. I think we have both immediate health and human safety needs. For example, entire communities like Grizzly Flats are gone. And if and when people are able to move back into those areas, we're not sure whether water supply is going to be available. Is the funding that we're talking about today supposed to be available for both those short-term, like immediate needs, or are we talking about, the projects that you listed earlier seem to be related to infrastructure and investment, although I did notice hauled water. So I guess I basically wanted to ask about that, and I'm sorry for the confusion in the way that I'm asking the question.
Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, sure. So, there is funding available for immediate needs. It's limited, and maybe Victor, if you can add a little more in. I know we kind of covered the roles and response. We have obviously responded to fire response needs and whatnot outside of drought as well. There is funding potentially available through our agency to respond to those kind of immediate interim needs, but it's really on a short term and kind of more focused basis. These programs are more about, that we're discussing today, are more about positioning to be, kind of in a better place to respond to future need, and not necessarily that kind of immediate response.
Thank you.
You're on mute, Jessica.
Sorry, thank you. Kelly, if you want to go ahead and go.
Yes, Kelly Hubbard, Director of Emergency Management, County of Santa Barbara. Thank you. So these funding opportunities that were just mentioned in Mark's presentation, I have not received direct information on how to access that funding. Is there going to be more? So I'm sorry, because you asked for questions, and so I don't know if you're still covering how we're going to access that funding on behalf of our constituents.
I think that's a great segue for us to continue in our presentation, because we do have that information in the presentation.
Perfect. Thank you.
So Matt, if you want to go ahead and continue, I think we're good to go.
Sounds good. So, all right. So now, we kind of have covered some of our recent activities. Just wanted to kind of touch on the existing programs we have. Again, cover kind of this outreach split that we're working with DWR. And then touch on a little more of the kind of targeted scope of these programs. Before I do that, we do have another pause for questions in a couple of slides, but I did just want to mention that, following that, we'll be going through kind of what the process is to obtain funding, what information would be required in a proposal for funding, and then also touch on some of the kind of eligible costs that we would be able to cover under reimbursement in this type of program. So if there are going to be any questions along those lines after the next few slides here, I would suggest holding them until the end so that we can kind of go through the overall funding process and approach before getting to any of those further questions. So this map, again, I showed it earlier with some additional information, but just wanted to kind of touch on this in a little more detail. It shows our current regional and/or statewide programs that we have in place that can provide assistance with well repair and replacement, provisions for bottled and hauled water, or individual tanks for homeowners. Some of these also include the more water quality focused things with well testing and point of use or point of entry treatment devices for individual homeowners, and then also technical assistance. So we have an existing statewide bottled water for schools program. There's also in the Central Coast, some bottled water and technical assistance funding from a regional standpoint. We're really well positioned again within the Central Valley with our partnership with Self-Help Enterprises and Tulare County with interim water well repair and replacement programs, then also water quality programs. And then we also have a recent project that is moving towards execution with CRWA for a well repair and replacement program in the Mojave area. So as you can see, we've got a lot of investments currently in the Central Valley, but do not have very good coverage in other places of the state, which is why we're here to discuss the possibility of kind of expanding these programs and developing more with other counties that are interested. Next slide, please. So as I had already stated, we've been coordinating closely with the Department of Water Resources to implement these outreach efforts and also these funding programs. And I just wanted to highlight kind of the county split for folks. So the intent, again, is for the Department of Water Resources to take lead in coordinating counties in the northern portion of the state, and the State Water Board will continue to add to our existing programs in the Central Valley and also implement new programs with interested counties and nonprofit partners in the southern portion of the state. I wanted to note that a county doesn't need to decide whom to contact. So later on in the presentation, we have my contact information for myself and then also for Fetty with the Department of Water Resources. We're having weekly coordination meetings and we'll ensure that the appropriate agency takes lead in coordinating with each respective county that's interested in developing one of these regional programs. It's not something that you need to decide ahead of time or anything along those lines. Reaching out and contacting either one of us will make sure that the appropriate agency is getting involved and taking lead. Next slide, please. So again, just to kind of reiterate the kind of targeted scope for these regional programs for providing interim assistance and whatnot is really for those state small water systems that serve a disadvantaged community, and then also domestic well users that are within a disadvantaged community or for a low income household. The funding agreements typically allow some flexibility to respond to the needs of a smaller community water system that also serves a disadvantaged community. But a lot of those specifics are things that if a county is interested in exploring these programs, we would kind of have more detailed discussions with the county and kind of fleshing out their proposal for what the actual need is within their jurisdiction, understanding that every county faces different challenges. Next slide, please. So now we just wanted to kind of touch on just from a high level some of the project types, and again we'll go over some more specific eligible costs for some of these items going forward, but these are just things that are typically included in these regional programs that we already have with some other nonprofit partners and counties. So typically they would include kind of an assessment task, which would include community outreach, reaching out to the individual homeowners and identifying need, domestic well testing as well, potentially interim solutions such as bottled water, tanks and hauled water, water kiosks or filling stations, and then also from a water quality standpoint, the installation of point of use or point of entry treatment devices and some short-term operation and maintenance there. In terms of longer term solutions, again, well repair and or replacement's probably the hot button one, especially with the drought and dealing with domestic well users. And then again, for individual households, point of use or point of entry could also be considered a longer term solution in some cases. Next slide, please. So just quickly touch on some funding limitations. Most of the funding that is available is targeted towards disadvantaged communities. So for well sampling activities and other interim solutions, we would look at the median household income for a community being 80% of the statewide average. And that would be to determine eligibility for participating in one of these programs. I will note that there are waivers that we have the ability to put in place currently for some of our existing programs that waive requirements for verification of income qualifications based on kind of larger scale emergencies, more recently with COVID-19 for our existing programs, and then obviously now facing the drought. Next slide, please. So again, here just a quick pause for questions if there's anything on kind of the existing programs that we have and kind of the general targeted scope of these efforts. Again, just to mention, we will be kind of going into more specifics on the process itself and whatnot. So feel free to ask any questions if you have them at this point.
All right, Matt, it looks like we have a few questions. We'll take a little bit of time, but I know that we want to get to the bulk of the upcoming information. So let's start with Andrew Lockman.
Hey, sorry, I had to get off mute there. Thank you. I'm Andrew Lockman, OES Manager at Tulare County. One of the challenges, concerns that we've seen thus far, and I'd love to hear how you guys are looking at addressing, is you mentioned a waiver process. There's obviously an application process, requirements for approval, so on and so forth. We found that process to be very bureaucratic and frankly slow. So I would hope that as we look at implementing this type of program, that we would be able to build that in just foundationally to have the flexibility to go out and do what we need to do, 8 o'clock at night to get implemented the next morning kind of thing. And then also just as a follow-up question there, you mentioned filling stations. Right now, my understanding is the filling station has been limited to potable drinking water. So that's one of the large unmet needs that we're finding is folks and being able to pick up sanitation water that doesn't necessarily need to be potable. And then we see people flushing bottled water down their toilets just for sanitation uses. So I don't know if you can comment on any flexibility there. Thank you.
Matt, do you have a response for Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, specifically with the waiver process, obviously it's kind of been an evolving situation with the pandemic, and our existing programs completely understand the concerns. And I know that our staff that work on those existing programs are kind of working through how to handle that in a more efficient way, and definitely something that will, be willing to have more discussions with each individual county on for what makes sense for the situations that they are facing. Regarding the filling stations for non-potable water, almost all of the resources that we have are kind of targeted primarily at potable water. But if there's a specific need for a county, again, those would be kind of separate discussions that we would be able to have to identify if there's a possibility of fitting in under our funding, or if there are other funding resources available that could potentially assist with that outside of what the State Water Board or Department of Water Resources have available.
Thanks, Matt. Before we go to another question, Molly, would you mind skipping back to the previous slide? There was a request to go back there. If we could just leave it there for a second and we'll continue our questions. Thank you. How about Lynn Rodriguez?
Hi, Lynn Rodriguez with Ventura County. And I think I accidentally raised my hand, but I do have a question that I was going to bring up later, but just very quickly, are you coordinating all these funds? I know there's funding coming quickly out of a lot of different sources. In our region, we're working on the Disadvantaged Community Involvement Grant, which is Prop 1, the DWR is administering. And so I guess my question, and then knowing about the SAFER program, how are all of these programs sort of being integrated so that local entities can better understand what's the appropriate way for them to, which funding is most appropriate for them for their needs? Or is it just strictly, this funding we're talking about today is strictly for emergency drought, drinking water, and anything else would fall into a different program?
Hi, Lynn. Thanks for the question. So I guess I did want to mention that For this program in particular, we're working closely with DWR and their small community drought funding program. However, the State Water Board has, its larger, safe and affordable funding for equity and resilience, the SAFER program, which draws on a number of different funding sources. And so, entities that are interested in that funding don't necessarily need to worry about what funding source we will be using. Just through our application process and our website, they will be able to find information on what types of projects we do fund generally for drinking water needs. And, as they apply to us, we'd figure that funding source element, on the back end.
Thank you.
Great, thanks, Jasmine and Lynn. How about next we have Steve Madrone?
Okay, sorry about that. Took a second to get unmuted.
No worries.
Yeah, I apologize if I missed this, but part of our solutions is going to be supporting distributed water storage, rainwater collection, and things like that. Are these funding sources going to be available in that way to communities to do distributed water storage? And then the second question is, are we coordinating with the legislature to provide additional incentives for rainwater collection and storage? In other words, reducing property tax burdens on those as property improvements, et cetera. So just curious about those things. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Matt or Jasmine, did you want to take that?
So this program doesn't specifically speak to rainwater storage. However, and I'll defer to my colleagues at DWR if they're funding, if they have funding sources available for that or any water conservation type efforts.
Thank you. As you mentioned, Jasmine, this is specifically for immediate and near-term drought relief. Obviously, because of the drought, we don't have rain immediately. But as far as funding rainwater collection and storage infrastructure and tanks and capacities, it would be something maybe eligible under certain funding programs that we have. I'm not sure if our small community, maybe as part of the long-term resiliency measures, maybe those can be eligible. I will defer to my colleague Steve, though, to weigh in on this. Steve, can you explain if this type of projects might be considered for long-term resiliency as part of the small community drought funding?
Yeah. Actually, the question you asked is a really good question, and it's actually one of the things that's not like this clear cut, for us right now. As Betty said, our matching orders for the small community drought relief program and for the urban water supplier, as well as the multi-benefit, are supposed to provide immediate and near-term financial and technical support. So if in your application you can prove that your rain catchment will provide immediate and near-term, we are willing to look at it, but hopefully probably as a part of a much larger project. So I will not dismiss it outright and say, oh, we will not consider it at all. We will look at it and to see how it provides immediate and near term. And one other thing we are doing also is that when we approach with projects, we look at how in the long term it can provide drought resiliency. So let's say if you say rain catchments, you want to look at distributed rain catchment, we may actually take a look at that and probably even expand it to look at what some of the other alternatives there might be out there. So that just to let you know the kind of flexibility that we employ in order to look at the projects that are coming out to us. And one more thing I want to say is that generally for many of our grant programs, we have what you call proposal solicitation package. It goes out and applicants send in applications, and applicants have to make sure that applications are complete. And we even sit down, we analyze them, we shortlist, and then we just make the awards. However, for this one, we do realize that different communities are not at the same place in their ability to be able to present us with complete packages. So when we work with those counties or communities that are not able to flesh out the program to meet our objectives. We work with them to see how best we can align what they're asking for with our programs. So if you have any projects out there, I encourage you to go read our guidelines, and yeah, feel free to approach us with those projects. And also along the way, you will Matt will show you exactly how to be able to access some of this information. I think I've said enough on this.
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate that. Okay, how about Kelly Hubbard?
Hi, just real quick on those funding limitations, verification of income qualifications may be waived during large scale emergencies. We are currently both in a large scale drought emergency and pandemic. So are those automatically waived at this time, or is it per application consideration?
Yeah, so for our existing programs, they are currently waived. For the ones, the language is still in the funding agreement with the requirements and would still be structured that way for these programs, so that the intent is that these would be programs that outlast the drought in some instances if a county is willing or interested in continuing them, especially from a water quality standpoint from our perspective. So the language would still be there, but yes, we are currently under those emergency orders for our existing programs, and those waivers are in place and would continue to be utilized for other programs that we would implement if available. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add there, Jasmine.
Perfect, thanks.
And as part of our coordination, DWR and the board, we might consider some of those projects for which best way to provide funding, as the small community drought funding, which we have, and other drought funding that DWR has, don't necessarily have this condition. We do give priority to DAC and communities, but it's not a hard requirement under those programs. The small community drought funding, the urban community drought funding, and multi-benefit, it's not, we do, as I said, give priority, but it's not necessarily the applicant or the recipient doesn't have to be a DAC.
Great, thank you so much, Becky. All right, our last question for this section is from Michael Prado Sr. Michael, you should be able to.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep, there you go.
I was just wondering, I serve on a severely disadvantaged community here in Sultana, but are they gonna be securing more funding for the domestic well owners due to the fact that in this area, eastern San Joaquin Valley, there's gonna be a lot of wells, more than there is now, going dry. So I was just concerned that some money be starting to be set aside more than what there is for those people. I know there's a lot of elderly people. I had one call me, you know, elderly, she's by herself, water went dry, she was freaking out. I got her the right resources, so I'm pretty sure she got a tank now. But it's kind of scary when you get a call like that from someone elderly. That's just my concern. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. That is a big concern, and we share your concerns on that. And hopefully we can, when we get through this, we'll have some counties that can be working on projects as well to assist residents. So we're going to go ahead and, yeah, absolutely. We're going to go ahead and move on. Matt, if you want to continue your presentation.
Sure. So now we're going to go over just kind of an overview of the process, provide some kind of additional details on specific costs and the reimbursement process and how that works from a high level, and then next steps and some resources for where you can find the applications and contact information and whatnot. So I wanted to start with just giving kind of a high level overview of the funding process. So first, a county would coordinate, or their nonprofit partner would coordinate with ourselves and DWR to develop a funding proposal and submit an application for funding consideration. At that time, our staff from either the State Water Board or Department of Water Resources would review the proposal and the budget submitted and work with the county to kind of refine that if needed before preparing a funding recommendation that would go to our upper management for review and approval. Once the funding for a project is approved or a commitment letter is provided, at that point is when a county or their nonprofit partner would be able to start to incur eligible costs for reimbursement. I will note that the reimbursement will not or cannot occur until the actual funding agreement is finalized and executed. So once the funding is approved or committed to the project, staff would coordinate to finalize and execute the funding agreement. And then once executed, a county would be able to submit reimbursement requests for any previously incurred costs and then costs incurred going forward, along with progress reports, just documenting the activities that are occurring along the way with the program. And then at that point, the state would pay reimbursement requests. Once a complete invoice and reimbursement request is submitted along with a progress report and approved, then reimbursement would be paid. Next slide, please. So just kind of a high level overview of our invoicing and reimbursement process. Again, to reiterate, the funding is reimbursement. So the costs can be incurred before, or must be incurred before, a county can submit an invoice to the state and the state can issue reimbursement. So this means that the county or their nonprofit partner would incur those costs to provide these services and then be reimbursed by the state once an invoice is approved. Again, reimbursements can only be paid once a funding agreement has been executed. So counties would need to be prepared to cover those upfront costs to implement the program while working towards the execution of a funding agreement. Invoices and progress reports are typically due quarterly within 45 days following the end of each calendar quarter, and must be accompanied by a progress report that describes the activities that were conducted during that period, and we typically have a template that we would provide. I'm sure that the DWR does as well. Kind of assuming that there are no issues with a reimbursement request and there's no dispute needed. If there were ineligible costs or inadequate documentation or missing backup documentation, those can delay reimbursement, but typically reimbursements are processed within 45 days of submittal. Next slide, please. So now we're going to go through some of the general information that's required for a proposal. And obviously this is something that we work directly with the counties to work through and help them kind of develop and refine the scope. But regardless of who ends up funding the programs, we've been partnering and coordinating with DWRs, I've mentioned, and are utilizing our existing urgent drinking water needs funding application to kind of collect the general information that would be required to develop one of these regional programs. The last page of that application does outline the additional information that would be needed specifically for the development of a regional program, such as a proposal and then a budget attachment and whatnot as well. The budget template is also something that we would provide once coordinating with a county and help them kind of pull together, and is something that would be modified based upon the proposed scope of work or scope of services that would be offered under one of these regional programs. If these programs are something that a county is interested in pursuing, we also have some examples of existing regional programs that we've developed and can provide example budgets and funding agreements to give a better sense of what is involved in that. Next slide, please. So just a little more kind of in depth on the specifics of what would need to be included in a proposal. We'd be looking for information on kind of the scope of need or the communities that are in need of assistance within the county's jurisdiction, a detailed proposal or scope of work write-up that describes the program that's being proposed, a detailed budget that's completed using either our template or a template provided by the Department of Water Resources, which would include any cost estimates from vendors or subcontractors that support the detailed budget that's provided, and then also a program schedule. I will note that the kind of intent for these programs is to, at least when putting together the proposal, the budget and the schedule for these programs, would be to utilize a 2-year period for developing the costs and the proposal. There's always an opportunity once these are developed and funding agreements are executed to, if needed, explore adding additional funding or additional time. But the thought is upfront that a 2-year period kind of makes sense for the initial effort, and then would be something that could be reevaluated at a later date. Next slide, please. So now I'm just going to touch quickly on some of the general costs that would be eligible, kind of one from an overall general standpoint for personnel and operating expenses that are incurred. And then over the next couple of slides, just some specific details on what can be covered under bottled water, for example, versus hauled water or a well program. So in terms of general costs that are eligible under a regional program for the county or their nonprofit partner, you'd be looking at personnel costs, which would be the direct staff time that's spent on the project. And this would include like administration and outreach, or administration of the funding agreement, outreach to identify eligible homeowners in need of assistance, and then coordination with any contractors. Also be able to cover any operating expenses for the implementation, such as any supplies or equipment needed to implement the project. Any professional contracted services, including work completed by vendors, subcontractors, or consultants would be covered. Any essential project related travel. And then finally, any indirect costs, which are kind of non-project specific costs or the cost of doing business and whatnot. And these are all things that as we assist you in developing your proposals and budgets, one of the kind of staff project managers would be able to work through any specific questions that you guys may have in developing those. Next slide, please. So just some of the kind of eligible costs that are typically allowed under a regional bottled water program obviously would include the purchase and delivery of bottled drinking water. Typically, there's a maximum allocation of 60 gallons per household per month, usually provided as 5-gallon containers, and we typically allow for 1 hand pump per household. Next slide, please. Now, just quickly, some of the eligible costs for a tanks and hauled water program would typically allow for the purchase, delivery, and installation of temporary water storage tanks for households or smaller state small water systems. And that would include any booster pumps or electrical work that would be needed to get those up and running and tied in. And then to fill the tanks, the programs would allow for the purchase and delivery of hauled water. Just 2 notes there for potable drinking water purposes under these programs. The hauled water must be from a permitted source and must be hauled by a certified water hauler. And I believe it's the California Department of Public Health that maintains a list of certified water haulers and does the certification as well. For hauled water, there's typically a maximum allocation of 50 gallons per person per day that would be provided under one of those programs. Next slide, please. So now just some of the eligible costs if we were looking at a well repair or replacement program that a county may have interest in implementing. We'd usually cover any of the kind of water quality sampling or laboratory analyses that would be needed, design of the well, any permits and or connection fees that would be required. And then obviously the construction of a new well, replacement of an existing well, and then well rehabilitation and repair if there's the possibility of getting an existing well back online, and then also well abandonment. These programs also can cover kind of the distribution and conveyance from the well up to the point of entry of the household. In some situations, there have been in a very small scale limited consolidation efforts that can be covered under those as well, like a lateral to an existing well or something along those lines. And then obviously any and all necessary appurtenances to get the well back online and connected to the household would be covered as well. Next slide, please. So, that kind of wraps up the summary of the services and eligible costs that can be covered under these programs and what some of the steps are if you're interested in pursuing this funding. In terms of next steps to kind of work towards developing one of these programs, it would really be to set up a meeting, reach out to either myself or Fedi with DWR to set up a meeting to discuss the need that's identified for your respective county. There is a slide that we'll leave up that does have our contact information. That was also included in the outreach letters that went out. Our staff will coordinate with the counties and their nonprofit partners to answer any questions on the application and funding process and assist the county with developing a proposal. And once that proposal is developed, it would be something that we'll review and make a funding recommendation on, and if approved, begin program implementation and negotiation of a funding agreement for execution to get these programs implemented. Next slide. So again, here's the contact information for both myself with the State Water Board's Division of Financial Assistance, and also Fetty with DWR for their drought funding coordination. And I believe that is the last slide we have, and can stop and take any additional questions that come up. There is also a slide that has several links that we'll show as well for both DFA's drought funding and also DWR's small community drought funding and their dry well reporting tool as well.
Great, thanks, Matt. And just to let folks know, we will be sending out the slides for this presentation, so you'll have access to all of those links. So we can go ahead and open this up. It looks like Sierra Ryan, did you have a question to begin?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
So I work for the County of Santa Cruz, and we're certainly interested in developing a program. I think I'm probably not the only person in a situation where we don't know right now of any of our community systems through our LPA program or any private well clusters that are going dry, but we also have no program or mechanism in place where people would necessarily come to us and tell us this. So what I'm hoping to do with this funding availability is develop the program, do the outreach, have a reporting mechanism in place, and probably do some water quality sampling and outreach. But should we find that there are situations where there really is a need for these emergency responses after developing this program, is that something that we would want to include in our application? Say, have money set aside for bottled water or for hauling if during our outreach we find that there are cases where it's needed immediately? Or would that be something, because we don't know of those situations right now, that we would need to do some sort of grant amendment for our program after it's been developed?
That's a great question. The intent of these programs is to really get ahead of the need, and understanding that we don't always know all of the answers up front. So, I think that the recommendation would be to include what would be required in those situations to respond to that emergency need as part of the proposal, and not, obviously having all of the answers and specifics to outline the exact cost potentially, so that there is flexibility to respond as those situations present themselves. And then if there is a need to add additional funding or shift funding around within a funding agreement, we can always come to that as that presents itself as well.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Matt. We also have a couple of questions that are coming in through the Q&A that folks are asking. How does this funding relate to DWR's small community drought relief program? Would you maybe, does DWR want to come on and discuss the relationship there?
Yes, this funding is the small community drought funding program at DWR cover a little more than the county programs. It also provides funding for the small water suppliers to implement their own projects and drought relief programs. But this is meant to outreach to counties to alert them that, hey, you are eligible to apply also under that program to implement your regional, immediate and interim drought relief programs. So as it's totally fine for the counties to apply on the behalf of their communities under the small community drought program. They are listed as an eligible applicant, and these programs will be funded under that program.
Great, thank you, Fabi. It looks like, Jasmine, do you want to answer a couple of the other questions that we have about who is eligible to apply?
Sure. Yeah, there are a couple questions in the chat regarding NGOs and if they would be eligible. So our thought was we would like to partner with folks at the county level. However, an NGO, if there's a partner that's able and willing to administer the program on behalf of the county, they are eligible as applicants, and we could fund them directly, either through the State Water Board or DWR, I believe. Fetty, you can correct me if I'm wrong there. Yeah, so NGOs are eligible applicants if they're considered a 501c3 nonprofit.
Great.
Yes, thank you, Jasmine. Yes, NGOs are eligible if they are going to be implementing or coordinating or partnering with counties to implement these regional programs. But also under the Small Community Drought Funding Program at DWR, those can also be eligible for their own projects to respond to drought and to implement drought relief programs, as well as a host of other eligible entities, including all public agencies, special districts, mutual water companies, nonprofits, tribes, you name it. So a lot of eligible applicants can apply for the Small Community Drought Funding Program. The catch is the project has to be serving and benefiting a small community, which is a community not served by an urban supplier which provides to 3,000 or more service connections. So the project needs to be serving a small community. As far as the applicant, it can be any of the ones I mentioned.
Great, thank you. Let's go back to some of our live questions. Let's see, Lorraine.
Yes, good morning. Thank you very much. I just wanted to find out if federally recognized tribal governments are eligible to apply. And I think there was a little bit of that mentioned by the last speaker, Fetty. So can you elaborate? Would that be through water resources, that application? And what would be the category for that? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Again, as far as the county regional programs, they are specific for the counties and the entities partnering with them to provide countywide programs. However, I did mention that as part of the projects eligible under the Small Community Drought Funding, those could be any drought relief projects from all the eligible entities, including federally recognized tribes, as well as state Indian tribes listed on the state list.
Great, thank you. How about Angelina Cook? Angelina, did you have a question?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
All right, great. Thank you. My name is Angelina Cook. I am the Disadvantaged Community Involvement Coordinator for the Upper Sacramento Regional Water Action Group. It's through the state's IRWIN program. Lynn Rodriguez referred to it earlier. I work in small communities in Siskiyou County, and most of our water utility providers occur at the municipal or the city and service district level. So I think Matt said that the water board sent out notices of opportunity or letters to the county. I'm just curious which agencies at the county did receive these notifications, and is the county supposed to distribute this drought relief for all the local municipalities in the county, or is it just, are you looking? So I'm just trying to wrap my head around the bigger picture and see if you are going to utilize existing collaborations to expedite or make this process a little more efficient.
Matt, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I can take the first crack at it. So in terms of who these went out to, we had partnered with, I believe it was SWRCB, the Rural Counties group, to get this out to the Board of Supervisor level. It also went out through Cal OES's distribution channels for the EOCs with established counties and other points of contact. And then we did some more targeted outreach to counties that had a higher drought risk based on some of our prior evaluations. The intent of these programs is not to have the counties distribute funds directly to other cities or water systems or municipalities within their jurisdiction. It's more targeted towards those emergency and interim needs of the state small water systems and domestic well users. If there's an individual city or municipality that has a specific need, be it infrastructure related or emergency or drought resiliency, they can definitely contact us directly and submit an application that would be coordinated with our counterparts at DWR to consider which agency would be the best fit of funding. In terms of using those existing relationships, if there's chances to partner with nonprofits or others to kind of cover a wider area and not just focus to a specific county, that would definitely be something that I think we would be interested in as well, for efficiencies and whatnot. So.
Thanks, Matt. Okay, how about Sue Ruiz?
I did not have a new question. I just put one in the chat box, so you can answer it there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Kelly Hubbard.
Hey, I got a couple questions, and there's some nuances to what others have brought up. If I can ask them individually to make sure there's no confusion. I think it was Sue earlier who mentioned, so can this funding be developed? I just want to confirm that the funding can be used to develop a program to do the outreach and facilitation of this, since our county does not currently have a program to do the outreach and facilitation of this type of program with our small systems.
Yes, that is correct. The outreach and facilitation could be covered under these programs.
Okay, and then we can apply now. I think Mark, you indicated we can apply now, even if we're not clear on all of our needs, but kind of do a estimation or assumption as to what those needs are, since we know we will have them.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, and then last is probably more of feedback. We didn't get notified of this training through DWR until this morning. Through our DWR contact, we didn't get notified through Cal OES until I think a day or two ago. May I suggest that for these programs, actually I have two recommendations. State Water Board and DWR create contact lists that are direct to the OEM coordinators for each county and the small agency coordinators for each county. And then the other recommendation is there was presentation of conflicting concepts of who is eligible and what funding, because we're talking about different programs, and those pieces of information are being provided verbally, and it's very difficult to understand for those of us who are new to this concept, which concepts apply to which programs. And so if we can get those in one-page cheat sheets or whatever it might be, that would be extremely helpful for us to understand which programs operate how. Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly. And I do want to let you know that that is something that we're working on, the one-page cheat sheet, something like that. So we'll hopefully have something out available soon on that. All right, Mary Camp. Go ahead, Mary. All right, maybe we'll come back to Mary. Lynn Rodriguez.
Thank you. Lynn Rodriguez with Ventura County, with the Watersheds Coalition of Ventura County, which is the IRWM region for our county. And I want to second what I've heard a lot of people say about the role of county government, the role of OES versus the role of water districts, existing organizations or programs like IRWM. The IRWM regions are in a good position to they have a lot of these folks at the table, especially if we're actively engaged in the DACI grant program right now. So I just want to second that that's a resource for everybody. We did get notice of this. I did receive it through the Board of Supervisors and also through our local OES. And I wholeheartedly support the notion, which I was not clear on until it was just explained or in the answer to one of the previous questions about that we can apply to do more to reach out to our small mutuals. And we have many in Ventura County, many of which are disadvantaged community areas. So I just want to second basically what people are saying about it's a complex world that we all live in, and we don't always all get notified of things, and that's not the state's fault. But I want to second what people are saying about going through as many channels as possible for those of us that we're trying to respond to the drought. We're trying to get ready for the funding that's coming. We want to be able to better serve our constituencies, which for me includes all of our mutuals, make sure we're giving them current information. So cheat sheets, all of those things you're talking about is great. But my real question was, I went to the California Water Center website because it looked on your map like Ventura County was included in their bottled water program, but they only mention other Central Coast, and we're not technically Central Coast entities. They do not mention Ventura County. So I don't know if your map is up to date or not. But for us trying to figure out who are our key people to reach out to, it would be great to know in Ventura if we have anybody other than Community Water Center.
Thanks, Lynn. Are we able to respond to that right now, Matt?
We can follow up afterwards.
Okay.
Probably be best.
Thank you.
Great, thanks. I do have a couple of questions in the chat that I want to ask. Devin wants to know if there are any due dates that we should keep in mind.
So no particular due dates. I mean, the funding has appropriation timelines and whatnot, but those are way out in the distance. So nothing that applies specifically to applying for the funding. Obviously the drought is an evolving situation, and the hope is to get as many of these programs up and running in places of need before there's, a lot of major impacts or folks running out of water. So, I mean, there's maybe a deadline from a sense of wanting to get these developed quicker, but not particularly for receiving an application directly.
Great, thanks, Matt. And then another question is, if our county has already set up emergency help for residents, can we get reimbursed for our time infrastructure changes?
Not under these programs. The reimbursement would occur once we have a funding approval in place going forward, and only for eligible costs for what is approved under one of these regional programs.
Thank you. All right, let's go back and let's see. Mary, were you able to unmute yourself and ask your question? Hi, Mary.
Can you hear me?
Yes, there you go. Go right
Okay.
ahead.
I just wanted to clarify for people, the tribal organizations, that Anacita Augustine with the state is the tribal contact to assist with questions and information regarding tribal applications.
Thank you very much, Mary. Yeah, so Anacita is with the Department of Water Resources.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you very much for clarifying. How about Andrew Lockman? Did you have a question?
Yep. Hi, Andrew, Tulare County again. Just wanted to clarify a little bit here, springboarding on what Santa Cruz and I believe Santa Barbara were asking. If we put in a contingency application, as it were, knowing the general categories that we might need to expend funds in, but not necessarily knowing where or when, would we be able to go out and take immediate action within the eligible categories of work and sort out the modifications necessary later? Or are we going to be kind of beholden to an upfront modification and approval process every time? And the reason I ask that is our emergency managers are very accustomed to knowing eligible categories of work and go out do what you can within those categories and sort it out later. So that's going to be kind of a critical path issue for us if we have to stop, do a modification, get approval every time, or if we can go out and maneuver within the eligible categories and submit it to you later. Thanks.
Thanks, Andrew. Yes, absolutely. I think we would try to design our funding agreement as such, just considering how much unknown there is in these situations. And then I did want to mention also that once a funding request was approved, I guess on the State Water Board side by our deputy director, and then on DWR's side, once you had received a commitment letter, you would be able to go out and incur costs within those eligible categories.
Great, thanks, Jasmine. Kelly Hubbard.
Yep, sorry for all the questions.
We're here.
I understand that a lot of the counties, I know Andrew's one of them, have already implemented extensive bottled water, trucked water, well repair kind of concepts, and that those resources are starting to become limited and hard to access or find and identify. Is DWR, State Water Resource Control Board, providing any support to counties or agencies in identifying resources as they become more limited, or helping to facilitate that coordination?
Matt or Jasmine, do you have thoughts on that?
I mean, as we become aware of situations, we're doing what we can. We, in some of the other instances where we've come across that specifically for like hauled water and identifying hauled water sources, we partnered with, our co-partners with the emergency management program at the State Water Board, and also with our Division of Drinking Water to help identify additional sources. I mean, we understand especially when it comes to like purchasing of tanks or the availability of drillers and whatnot, the limitations and concerns there. It's not something that we directly have the ability to take kind of action in any mandate form or anything along those lines, but definitely can do our best to assist in identifying additional resources with what we have available.
Great, thanks, Matt. We do have another question coming in through the chat. It says, realistically, when can counties expect to be able to actually apply for the funds, and when will the full application materials and requirements be available to counties for that process?
Go for it, Jess.
So you can apply now. I think that if maybe Jessica, if you could go back a slide to the next steps. I think our thought was, we would receive interest.
Do that, go back to the next step slide.
We would receive interest from counties, and then kind of set up a call with you to discuss in more details. And we have additional information as well that we can share. But yeah, we would discuss in more details, what your county needs and what we could do on our end or DWR's end, depending on where you're located. And then after that discussion, we could work with you as you develop a proposal for, what your county is looking for from this program. And, that on our end, we would then recommend the funding for approval from our upper management. And once that happened, you would be able to start incurring costs and start implementing the program. However, it would take, there would be a little bit of lag time, likely on the order of months before an executed funding agreement was available.
Thank you, Jasmine. And we have just a couple minutes left. So Sue, one final question.
This is not an easy question, and I hate to have it be a negative one at the end, but it is a little bit. And so maybe the point of this is to have further discussion and to be prepared for the next training. Some people have brought this up already, and my question really is about timing. I was involved personally with this response to dry wells at the last drought, and it was unbelievably long length of time before we could actually get water to a dry well house. So the whole timing from this meeting, which I'm glad you guys are doing, and it's a good thing, and I don't want to be negative, and I'm sorry if I'm sounding that way, but there's a sense of urgency here, and timing matters. It matters, it matters, it matters. And so what's going to be done, I guess, from the water board side, from DWR's side, to not take as much time as we did last time for the counties to get these things done, to get this in, to help them get set up, to get the contractors in place, to go through all the legal things that have to happen with all the agreements between the county and the state, and then the county and the person they serve, and on and on and on and on, and deal with what Kelly said. It's hard to get resources right now. It's hard to find people to actually deliver the water or put those tanks in if you're going to use non-potable water for the water in the house. What's going to be done from your guys' end to expedite this in a way that is much, much improved from the last time? And again, I don't want to sound negative, but it's a really important question.
Thanks.
Actually, Jasmine, let me chime in really quick. I really appreciate Sue's question. And generally, the state is known to be slow, etc. But this time around, we're moving really fast. So the budget approvals came at the end of June, and then we had to wait for them. How do you call it? The trailer bills, etc. And within a month, for the small community drought relief program, we've been able to release guidelines, and we've already made a funding of $25.5 million right now, all within 1 month. So we are moving really, really fast. So if you make a proposal, it goes to the water board. If the water board can fund it, they'll fund it immediately. If they can't, they will get it to DWR. And we're expecting that if it's an emergency, we should probably be able to move on it within weeks and be able to, or maybe even sooner, and be able to provide commitment letters that allow you to be able to start work immediately. So no, we are actually moving really fast this time around. One big thing you need, each of you needs to take from today's meeting is the name of Matt from the water board, and also Fetty. So if you're from a county and you're thinking of implementing a program, you want to be in touch with these people, and then they will funnel you to the appropriate programs, etc. Because we do notice that we presented a lot of information today, and it might take some time working through. But if you don't know what to do, talk to these two people. Thanks.
Thank you, Steve. And I second Steve's comments. The funding application is open, for example, for the small communities funding, and it's on a first come, first served basis. So there is no deadline to apply or wait for a month or two to receive applications and review them. No. The moment you submit your application, it will get handled as soon as possible. And the good thing also, the cross coordination we have with the board, the intent is not to leave any entity that needs help behind. So we want to cover all bases. It doesn't matter if you are not eligible for funding because you are not a DAC. For example, the condition of the funding with the board, they can hand us that application and we can deal with it. Or if you are in a county that is not covered by the governor's emergency proclamation, that is a restriction for our funding, at least right now. In that case, we hand that application to the board and they deal with it immediately. So hopefully we are trying our best to be as swift as we can. We know this is something that we need to provide help for conditions that are developing and emergency conditions.
Thanks, Stephen, Fetty. And I just wanted to add that, I think the intent with our program here is more to set us up well for future drought. I mean, unfortunately, just given the timing, it is true that, we'd be less likely to be able to respond to a true emergency situation unless there is an existing program already. For example, like the ones we have in our Central Valley area through self-help. So, the intent is looking forward a little bit to the more kind of intermediate term and long-term to work with counties to just develop better resiliency and better set them up for future drought situations.
Great, thanks everyone for your responses. I think Water Board staff can stay on for a little longer to answer questions. I understand that we're at time, and so some people may need to go. I just wanted to let people know that there was a question if we can provide the chat and the responses. We're going to be putting together, a Q&A document that we can forward along to folks for that as part of the email that we'll send out with links to the PowerPoint slides and the recording and other materials that would be helpful. And then also when we end this workshop, you may get a request for an evaluation. So it would be helpful if you could respond to that for us. But in light of that, if staff are okay, I'm going to continue taking some of these questions. So Andrea, did you want to go ahead?
Hi, yeah. So my question is about seeking contractor proposals. Do we still need to seek out two contractor proposals in these projects? Or if we find one that we know we've worked with before in the past, can we just go straight with that one? So usually in the past, actually right now, one of the holdups that I'm experiencing that's kind of lengthening out this process is because of the contractors and the proposals. And I guess we want to compare apples to apples, but if one contractor turns in oranges and we have to ask them to turn into apples, that kind of makes it longer.
Did we have any of our staff who can respond?
Yeah, so I guess to reiterate something Matt may have said earlier, the State Water Board or DWR won't be taking on the role of, facilitating the provision of the services. Unfortunately, we provide the grant, and counties would need to partner with, bottled water provider, for example. I'm wondering if Matt could jump in on, the contracting element, but I'm guessing that, if counties have someone in mind, they're welcome to use them, or we may have technical assistance or something to facilitate, the the finding of appropriate entities that can help with some of these services.
Yeah, sure. And I mean, specifically to the question, we understand the limitations of needing to get multiple bids, especially in situations when responding to urgent drinking water needs and emergencies. So there is some flexibility there. And, it's definitely something that we can work through with each respective county and their nonprofit partners to identify what makes the most sense in those circumstances, and if there's any flexibility on any of those specific requirements on kind of a case-by-case approach.
So I guess what you're saying is if we do have a trusted contractor that we know is certified, we've used them before, could we just go straight to that one, or would we be ineligible for funding if we did not want to seek out the second opinion or second contractor estimate and proposal?
Are you referring specifically to like bottled water or?
Mainly well repair. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're going to want to see the bids if we're looking at a larger program to kind of identify what the difference is there. Obviously we would take those things into account in coordinating with you directly. It's not like a hard and fast, no, because you don't have another bid or there's not another contractor available that you're not going to be able to proceed with this. And, a lot of those are things that we worked out in negotiation of the funding agreement as well, and not necessarily need to be known when developing one of these programs up front. So Fetty or Steve, I don't know if there was anything you guys wanted to add from DWR standpoint on that as well.
I know that one of the conditions for grant funding is to proceed with competitive bidding anytime you hire a consultant or a subcontractor. It's the responsibility of your agency to abide by those requirements of the law. And if you have special circumstances or something, you can obviously explain and show that you did your due diligence to comply with the competitive bidding requirements.
I appreciate the mention of due diligence. Thank you. Sometimes they do take a while to get back to us, or there's not enough clarity in the first conversation on what the project scope would entail. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Great, thank you. How about Siddharth?
Hi, with regard to flexible funding, this is Sid Nag from SWRCB. I was aware, or if I'm aware of funding that has been budgeted per the public resources trailer bill that is meant to be incredibly flexible and non-constrained. If you look at the budget language, it broadly appropriates it to several agencies for response to drought emergencies. I believe the ultimate amount that was given, appropriated rather, was 25 million. Has that funding been received by the agencies and decided upon as to the plan for disbursement, which agency is going to be the lead, how applications are made for that funding in specific? If you've heard from a lot of our counties, there's a gap between the programs, quote unquote, that they may establish in response to drought for the long term and immediate needs from wells going dry, et cetera. I'm wondering if that is being thought of as something, per Jasmine's comments earlier, something that can serve to bridge the gap in the interim.
Hi, I'm not familiar with the funding you're referring to. In the recent Budget Act, the State Water Board received 10 million for drought response, and DWR received 200 million for their small community drought funding program. So those are two pots of money, if you will, that this county program that we're discussing would be drawing upon. And we also have, the State Water Board has other funding sources available as well that could be applied here.
Thank you, Jasmine. In the chat, someone asked, is there any federal funding involved, or is this all state funding?
So this is all state funding through our general fund.
Thank you. Lynn?
Hi, thank you again. Sorry, all these questions. My question relates, and I did put it also in the Q&A in case you didn't get to me, but for those counties, and Fetty talked about it a little bit, that some counties are not included in the governor's drought declaration, and Ventura County is one of those. And I heard him say, and I just want to clarify this a little bit, that as the trailer bill language allows for a secondary way to qualify is through State Water Board finding. So for the funding that would come from the State Board, which is, this is funding that we're talking about today, do we need to make a special request for that since we're not included, or is that just automatically a consideration when we apply?
Go ahead, Fetty. You're on mute.
Sorry, I was stating the facts as of now. That funding is restricted to those counties that are under emergency declaration, or the board deems that they are under emergency. I don't know how to proceed to get a board declaration for your county. Maybe Matt can elaborate on that, but
right. So we were still looking into that with our Office of Chief Counsel, but that would only apply if the State Water Board was unable to fund the county that was not included in the declaration. And so at this time, we do have funding available that we can use towards those counties coming forward to us interested in this program. But if we did get to a point where the State Water Board had run out of money for this, then we would need to explore what Fetty is referring to, I think.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, I don't see any other hands right now. I do have one final question in the Q&A. It says, is there any talk of this becoming a major declaration which would release potential FEMA funds? And I don't think we have that answer here. We don't know if if a major declaration would be coming. So I'll do kind of a last call for any questions if you want to raise your hand. And oh, Michael Prado, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yes, hi Jessica and everybody that put this webinar together, State Water Board. Thank you for doing a fantastic job. I know you guys have had your hands full and it's not easy, but I give you a lot of praise for what you guys have done so far. Thank you.
Well, that's very kind, Michael. Thank you so much for that. And I hope we were able to answer a lot of questions. We know there are a lot more pending. So we will continue to work on this. Again, if you have no other folks who are interested in learning about this, we will be doing another workshop on the 31st in the afternoon. Again, it will be the same material. So it is not, you don't need to attend both. Molly, could you advance the slide for us, please? Just want to let you know that if you do have questions about general drought questions, both the State Water Board and DWR have drought websites, which are listed here. If you have general drought questions, we also have contact information here. I do want to remind you, we will be sending these out so you don't have to frantically jot down our information. We'll get the slides to you with information. And then if you could go to the final slide, Molly. This is just to let people know some specific additional resources that both DWR and State Water Board have that we'll be able to send your way as well. Much of this was discussed today or was mentioned. So thank you again for participating, and we encourage you to stay in touch, especially the counties And those entities that are interested in receiving funding, please reach out and talk to our financial assistance people. Thank you again.